Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Nama saya Rika Tamara Pangestu, NIM saya 1907055080. Di sini saya mau memberikan presentasi linguistik tentang syntax. So with syntax, we enter a level of linguistic analysis that is higher than morphology, although at places, distinction between the two becomes blurred. Morphology, as it is often claimed, has no autonomous existence, as syntactical analysis includes morphological processes. Ferdinand de Saussure himself considered morphology as part of syntax. Syntax has been defined by Richard Platt and Weber as the study of how words combine to form sentences and the rules which govern the formation of sentences. In generative transformational grammar, the syntactic component is one of the three main parts of the grammar. This component contains the rules for forming syntactic structures and rules for changing these structures. Grammar and grammatical analysis include both morphology and syntax. Syntax may be roughly defined as the principles of arrangement of the constructions formed by the process of derivation and inflection or words into larger constructions of various kinds. The distinction between morphology and syntax is not always sharp. Syntax, there is something called immediate constituent analysis. It is a method of sentence analysis that was first mentioned by Leonard Bloomfield and developed further by Roland Wells. It is a system of grammatical analysis that divides sentences into successive layers or constituents until in the final layer. Each constituent analysis consists of only a word or a meaningful part of the word. Next, there is something called labeling. The concept of labeling was introduced to remove this inadequacy. As Holliday observes, these divisions tell us very little about the functional importance of the constituents and explain the grammatical structure. It will be necessary to say something about the particular function that each part has with respect to the structure of the whole. If we use bracketing method, then the brackets are labeled. If on the other hand we use tree diagram method, then nodes are labeled. Labeling gives us an insight to the syntactic function of these constituents. Labeling means putting name on things, and so it is a way of specifying what these elements are. The label provides some kind of definition of the units that have been identified as parts of some larger whole. In principle, there are two ways of labeling a linguistic unit. One is to assign it to a class, the other is to assign it to a function. Hence, there are two principles according to which we can label the constituents of a grammatical structure. One is by class, and two is by function. So in phrase structure grammars, they consider sentences as linear sequence of elements. The aim is to identify these elements for their function and class them appropriately. It is concerned with how elements of sentence, such as morphemes, phonemes, phrases, clauses, and parts of speech are put together. One of the weaknesses is that while it is efficient in explaining inter-sentence constituent elements, it cannot show inter-sentence relations such as declarative and interrogative, active and passive, and so on. Next, there is something called domination notion. This notion emphasizes the layered composition of a syntactic structure where each lower segment is governed by the rules of mutual dependency. Next, what is transformational generative grammar? It is a set of grammar rules that are used when basic clauses are combined to form more complex sentences. An example is the idea that sentences have surface structure and deep structure levels. In Robin's words, transformation being a method of stating how the structures of many sentences in languages can be generated or explained formally as the result of specific transformations applied to certain basic sentences or structures. The main point at which transformational generative grammarian diverges from his predecessors is the belief that he is not interested in the actual sentences, the given corpus of observed data, but rather he is interested in the possible utterances, the fact of what a speaker can produce. His capacity to produce utterances is directly related to his competence. Performance, on the other hand, is what he really does at the time of producing sentences. In Chomsky's words, The speaker's knowledge of the language and his performance is his actual use of language in concrete situations. As we have discussed in transformational generative grammar, there is something called deep and surface structure levels. The deep structure in linguistics is a theoretical construct that seeks to unify several related structures. Meanwhile, surface structures is the outward form of a sentence. Next, in syntactic, there are multiple processes. One is conjoining. Conjoining is the process of certain parts or two more sentences are similar in a structure. Next, there is embedding. In one sentence, it is included within the other. Next, discontinuous constituent. Scholars of linguistics worked with cutting, classifying, and labeling elements. Among difficulties they faced in following the methods was that it was simply not possible to cut into neat segments. There is thus discontinuity in the sentences. Okay, so that concludes my linguistic presentation of syntax. I'm sorry if I made any mistakes. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.